Copywriters have to get really sharp about whatever topic they write about, and that's one of the benefits of finding a niche and sticking with it.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guide, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. It's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guide, and it's time for episode 88 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where you'll discover one simple thing, how to grow your business with email marketing. How to grow your business with marketing, really, how to get more customers, how to crank up the value of those customers, and automate things as much as possible so you can run around at the park with your kids and do all that crazy cool stuff. Today, I'll be talking to Mr. Roy Furr. Now, Roy, I met him at Titans of Direct Response, the copywriting conference I was at a while back, and he was actually the copywriter for the sales letter for that conference. So he's, he knows personally a lot of the biggest copywriters in the world right now, and so I thought I'd grab him and put him on the, get him to do a podcast with me on what he's up to and some of the copywriting strategies he uses to really get great results with his own list and for his clients. So today we're going to talk about the value. I mean, he has a crazy value per email lead, that sort of value per dollar per lead, which you'll hear about in the episode. And we're going to also talk about some core direct response concepts, because I believe, and he believes as well, that a lot of this stuff, it comes back to fundamentals. I mentioned last week about the opportunistic stuff, that you really can't be opportunistic about, business ideas or projects within the business, or even tactics. That you can't think, I'm just looking for the next greatest and latest and greatest tactic to grow my business. It really does come back to fundamentals. So we're going to talk about some of those fundamentals today. To get the show notes for this episode of the McMethod Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/88. Now, this week's McMaster's Insight of the Week is to know your values. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we all make decisions based on whether we want to go to the gym or not go to the gym, or go out to party on the weekend, or spend time with the family, or all the different things, all the decisions we have. We have a filter that we run our decisions through, and that's what makes them. And sometimes we feel like we made the right decision. We feel aligned with the decision, and it feels good. And other times, we don't feel good about it. We question ourselves. We doubt ourselves. So the advantage of knowing what your values are and taking the time to understand them, your core values, what drives your decisions, is that you'll have a conscious way of knowing when you made the right decision and when you didn't. Okay? So I did an exercise recently. This is what I did. I'm going to get a list of 400 different values. I actually did this exercise with a podcast guest who was on probably a couple months back. His name's John Logar, and you can go and find the podcast in the archives if you like. And he helped me with the exercise. And basically, we got 400 different values, 400 different things, and different ideas, like it might be health or nutrition or family or loved, all these different things. And the idea is that, you out of those 400, you choose all the ones that resonate with you. And I ended up with, I think, a list of 75. Then you do it again. Out of those 75, I had 30. And out of the 30, I had 20. And eventually, we whittled it down all the way to 5. And then I ranked the 5 in terms, from highest to lowest. And there you go. I have a set of values. And it's not so much about deciding what the values are in the exercise. It's more about eliciting them. Okay, diving under the hood of your brain and figuring out what really drives you already. Okay. And what's going to happen is those shift. But the advantage of knowing this stuff is it really helps you to make decisions and be clear on what you're doing, why it's important to you, what really matters. So you can wake up each morning, you can look in the mirror, and you know that what you're doing today is really moving your life forward in the way that you want to move forward. I mean, I think this is the key to having that, really satisfying, fulfilling life, is knowing what your values are and then crafting a life, creating a life that allows you to live out those values. I talked about a couple of weeks back about this idea of passion versus getting good at something. I think that's the wrong question to be asking. A better question is probably going to be something along the lines of, what are your values? And are you living a life aligned with those values? Because if you are, it's going to feel freaking awesome. But if you're not, then it's going to feel pretty empty. Okay? So that's the exercise. You could do it yourself. You go talk to John Logar. He's a really cool guy, really friendly. You reach him out to him via email. I think he has a website. It might be Call John Logar, and you can jump on a phone call with him too. CallJohnLogar.com, I think that is. That might be wrong, but it's something like that. Anyway, that's that. Now, that was this week's McMaster's Insight of the Week. You probably know what McMaster's is by now if you've been listening to this podcast, but just in case you don't, it's a private community VIP community, you might say, with people who pay a monthly fee for access to a forum and training products. And I get in this forum, I reply to their threads, there's other members in there replying to their threads. And the whole goal here of this sort of networking, it's a bit of a mastermind, you might think, is to really help people grow their business, get more customers with less time, with less effort, with less fuss. Because that's what we all want, right? That's why you're listening to this, is you do want more customers. You want them with less effort. You want to, so you can do all that, so you can really live that life in accordance with your values, okay? That's what McMasters is all about. If you want to learn more about it and even sign up, go to themcmethod.com/McMasters. You'll be able to get all the information there, and I would love to see you inside the forum. That's it for now. Let's get into this interview with Mr. Roy Furr. It's John McIntyre here, the autoresponding guy. I'm here with Roy Furr. Now, Roy is a copywriter. I met at the Titans of Direct Response conference a couple months back. By the time this post go live, it'll be a couple months ago in Stamford, Connecticut, which was so Titans of Direct Response was an incredible marketing conference with all the big guys, Gary Bencivenga and Dan Kennedy and all those guys. And anyway, Roy, it turns out he's a copywriter who was at the conference, but he actually wrote, from what I remember, Roy wrote the sales letter for Brian Kurtz from Boardroom, who actually put the event on. So Roy's worked with some of the biggest guys in this industry in the direct response game. And I thought I'd get him on the show to talk about sort of the lessons he's learned and sort of a bit about what we both got out of Titans and what was some of the core concepts that that were talked about there. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Roy, how are you going today, man?
I'm doing very well. And I feel honored actually to be on the podcast. I know what a huge effort these can be to put on and to connect with all the great people that you've had on your podcast so far. And I feel honored to be, I guess, featured alongside of them here. So
you're one of them now, man.
I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, before we get into some of the content, so what we just discussed this, a minute ago. Can you give the listener just a bit of a background on who is Roy Furr and what are you up to?
Yeah, so in 2004, I got a degree in psychology, and it was an undergraduate degree, and I promptly got just about the best job you qualify for with an undergraduate degree in psychology, which is a customer service job at the local gas company. And it was an absolutely miserable job. So for people that didn't pay their heating bill all winter, and then the first warm day of spring came and we went out to shut off their service, I was the guy that picked up the phone when that person called in, if you didn't pay your bill and you started yelling at me because I shut off your service, apparently. Well, it was a horrible job. It was my first full-time job out of college. And it was really a miserable existence. But I worked from like noon to 9 p.m. and most people don't want to call the gas company after about 6 p.m. So I had a bunch of time in the evenings to read. And I'd been a casual writer. My biggest commercial success as a writer was when my grandma bought 10 copies of my self-published poetry book for all my aunts and uncles. But I found a book called The Well-Fed Writer. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting title. And I started reading it and discovered this whole copywriting thing. And that book in particular, he wasn't a direct response copywriter. So I quickly went down my own rabbit hole. But that was back in 2005, discovered direct response copywriting. By fall 2005, I had a full-time job basically running a marketing department for a small business out in Oregon. We more than doubled that business over the next 4 years, put them on Inc. magazine's list of the fastest growing small businesses in the country, and had a ton of success there. And then in 2010, I broke off on my own. I became a full-time freelance copywriter. I wrote a lot of business opportunity stuff in that first year, and then transitioned by late 2010 to almost exclusively working with the big financial publishers and doing direct response then. In late 2010, I got a lot of folks who follow copywriting know AWAI. Every year they have their boot camp. As we're talking, that just ended. Unfortunately, I missed it this year. But in 2010, I was the guy that got the big $10,000 check up on stage. So I love using that picture for being like the hottest up and coming copywriter.
How did you get that? I'm curious. What was the challenge of the game?
Yeah. So it's kind of a multi-layered process for choosing it, but largely you get on their radar by working with AWAI. I mean, obviously they're kind of aware of all their students, but they're most aware of the students who show up at boot camp and spend a lot of money with them, and they're even more aware of the people who work for them. And that year, I wrote what was their largest ever opportunity product promotion. It was a promotion that did so well that they had to actually shut down selling the product. Now, normally what they do and what they still do is they launch a product. They don't do like the product launch formula model. They launch a product and they just sell it from that point forward. Well, it did so well that within a day or two, Katie called me up and she said, Roy, I'm a little nervous because too many people want this. And I said, well, you should shut it down. And they said, no, we can't do that. We've never done that. Never done that. And then, about 3-4 days later, they say, Roy, we're going to go with your idea. We're going to have to shut this down. And so within 2 weeks, they shut it down because it was just selling too well. And then launched it again as with even more content a few months later. But it was largely that promotion that cemented the $10,000 award that they offer.
That's a cool story.
Yeah.
So what happened after that then? So you're at this thing, you got the $10,000 thing, and then what happened?
Yeah, well, at the time I had been just starting to do work with the big financial publishers, and I got a bunch of gigs with various financial publishers at the time, and one of them actually locked me up for the next 18 months as an exclusive for them, where I did a bunch of copywriting. I wrote my first $1 million promotion there, had a lot of success with them, and even had the opportunity to kind of do some copy chiefing, like helping to run the copywriting department in kind of an interim position. And then I went back out into the freelance world after 18 months, and I've continued to work with a bunch of other folks and build my network and just go for a ride, I guess. It's a wild world. Even these big financial publishers, it's kind of a wild world to be freelancing, bouncing between them.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's. I'm curious. Just before we get into the core direct response stuff, I'm wondering. After you tell that story, where are you trying to get to in 5 years' time? Do you want to still be the copywriter, or do you want to have a company?
Well, one of the things that I've dealt with in speaking with the best copywriters in the world, because I'm on a first name basis with most of the best copywriters in the world. And so I get to have conversations with them that a lot of people don't. And there's one guy who most folks wouldn't know about. His name is David Galland. He's currently with Casey Research. He was a partner in Everbank, which is this huge online banking success story in the U.S. over the last couple decades. He hosted the New Orleans Investment Conference for, I think, 8 years. He helped launch the Blanchard Group of mutual funds. And so he has billions of dollars of sales to his name, even though you don't know who he is. Yeah. Well, one of the things that he told me when I was working with him at Casey Research was, find a way to get equity stakes in business. I mean, the freelance game is nice for a while, earning fees and royalties and even some really substantial royalties. But if you can find a way to become a partner in a business and use your marketing skills as your capital that you're bringing to the table, that is the single best way to make a bunch of money off marketing and off copywriting. And that's far more than being a freelance writer. I mean, that's a lot of times you're thinking about building a copywriting team and developing marketing strategies online, offline, understanding, if it's appropriate. Is there a direct mail universe you can go into? Yeah, that's shrunk in the last few years, but the folks that I work with that are using the mail are still getting incredible response rates. So there's less competition in that mailbox now. It may be cheaper to go out online, but getting new customers through the mail it's a great way to go right now. Yeah.
That's a cool idea. I think if there's a copywriter listening to this, there's going to be some of that. Because I know I've been in that position before, right, where I don't do too much copywriting these days, but I've been in a position before where I sort of wanted to keep going with the copywriting. I wanted to become very successful with it. And that's an interesting, I haven't heard that way of approaching it, where instead of just doing, you could do small partnerships with partnering with, say, a traffic guy and doing like an internet marketing product. But I like this idea of partnering in a big company and taking an equity position in that company, because that has much bigger potential than just a
Well,
royalty deal.
David's example was an interesting one. There were less than 10 founding partners, and I don't know how big Everbank is today. And I don't think he has a stake in it anymore. I think he might have sold his stake. But I mean, just think about that. He's one of, less than 10 founding partners in like the largest online banking success story in the last decade or two. There's got to be something to that, in terms of
$2 billion market cap right now.
Okay. And I'm sure he cashed out before that, but still, it's
Exactly.
And he's done this over and over and over and over again. And it's something like I don't know the exact details, but I know Clayton Makepeace has a partnership agreement with Weiss. I don't think he's a shareholder because of something that I listened to, a presentation that he gave where he just said he didn't want to deal with being a shareholder. Dan Kennedy, he is a shareholder in multiple direct response businesses. The Kennedy's barber club being one that I know that he has some sort of stake in. These great copywriters are doing this, over and over again. Gary Bensavinga, he actually said at one point that one of his biggest regrets of his career as a copywriter was not going off and forming his own business. So what did he do when he retired? He formed Fresh Pressed Olive Oil, which is an olive oil of the month business that he has a stake in.
It's a very interesting. It's an interesting thing that because I think sometimes it's easy. I remember when I was learning how to write copy and really in the trenches, writing down things by hand and reading all the books all the time. Is it was easy to think, well, this is really the point here. It's just let's just make some money with some sales letters. Let's write some emails. Let's do that kind of stuff. But the end game is really it's not really the end game. It's basically if you want to get wealthy, you want to end up with that FU money. You need to get into a position where you're a business owner. Whether it's you own 100% of the business or you're a partner in it, you split it so you write the copy and other people build the business. However, the deal is you have to get to that point where you've got equity, where you own some sort of a business, some part of it, if you want to become really, really, really wealthy.
And ideally a business where you may work hard up front, but then you're able to set up processes and systems and stuff where you're able to step away and still continue collecting those checks without having to be writing copy every day for the business. That's a great long term. When you think about something, I keep going back to it just because it's an example that we've brought up. It's an interesting concept with Everbank. It's a bank. They don't need a new sales letter every week or month or something. It's.
This is another thing too. I've noticed in the internet marketing field, and I find even with the direct response game, is not everyone, of course, but there's a lot of small thinking. There's thinking at let's say $10-20 million is a nice business to have. And yeah, it's nice, but if you want to make $100 million or $500 million, or say with Everbank's $2.2 billion. As far as Google's telling me right now. So, if you want to play at those kind of levels, it takes a much, much, much bigger idea. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to build, say, a $2 billion business on the top of a few books. And there may be publishing companies out there that are like that, but the field's very small.
Mark Ford and Bill Bonner, who are partners in Agora, and Mark has written about this under Michael Masterson. His book Ready, Fire, Aim is must read for anybody in the direct response business. They've really perfected the model of they build a small business. And then they'll get it past 1 million just by figuring out how to sell one thing. They'll get it past 10 million by selling a lot of things that those same customers want. And then after 10 million, they start to spin off divisions. And you see this with Agora all the time. Money Map Press used to be a division of Oxford Club. Stansberry has divisions and separate companies. Palm Beach Letter is actually kind of underneath Stansberry. And so they have this kind of, family tree that are all owned by the Agora proper, but it's all these independently operating business units. And we're talking a very solid 9-figure business with divisions of it that are still growing very fast. And that's run by 2 copywriters. actually, there was a sales letter that came out recently that said basically if Bill Bonner, because he was the founder and is the majority owner, I'm pretty sure, if he wanted to be a billionaire today, he could be. He would just have to package up Agora and sell it. But he doesn't want to be a billionaire. He wants to write about the economy and own this business, and he's happy with where he's at. So he's not just trying to cash out. But yeah, it's and they thought big. They thought about building a publishing empire, and they figured out this model that's outlined in Ready, Fire, Aim of essentially supporting the intrapreneurship of, you get a really good Porter Stansberry was a really good copywriter for one of their divisions. I don't remember. And he said, I want to write my own newsletter. And so he wrote a sales letter and launched a newsletter. And, now you have Stansberry. It's this is the deep, dark secret for customers of this industry is that a lot of the newsletters, copywriters have to get really sharp about whatever topic they write about, and that's one of the benefits of finding a niche and sticking with it. You get really, really sharp about a topic. And so a lot of newsletters, are written or compiled by, on the front side, a copywriter.
I mean, the interesting thing, but there's an interesting thing there where, they like Bill Bonner and Michael Masterton, they're copywriters, but there's an interesting thing where it's not the copywriting part of their brain that built the company, it's the entrepreneurial part of their brain. So, let's say, the listener here they might be a copywriter or a consultant of some sort, but if you want to have a company, if you don't just want to be writing sales letters or maybe passing a few things on to copywriters you have or something small like that, if you want to have a company, that requires, you're going to have to put your copywriter hat on to write your sales letter. But when it comes to building the company and setting up processes and hiring staff and all that sort of stuff, you got to be an entrepreneur. And it's an interesting reminder, I think a very important reminder that I guess to think big and that different. I mean, it's not you don't have to just be a copywriter.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's kind of like the entrepreneur that started a business and got it off the ground and going is not the entrepreneur that can take it to $100 million company. And to some degree, you can do that in your head. You can make that switch if you are self-aware enough to do that. And so, copywriting alone may help you build a $1 million business or a $5 million business just by going out and writing a bunch of sales letters. But when you want to take that next leap, I'm not saying you should hire MBAs because I tend to, as a whole, have kind of a negative impression that they're built for middle management in large companies. But you have to have kind of that systems MBA mindset that's taught and figure out how you can transition, I guess, or put on the different hats at different times and say, okay, when we just need to sell products, I need to put on my copywriter and marketing strategist hat. But when I want to build this big business, I need to put on my system builder hat and fill in the copywriting roles, ideally. So.
Okay. So I'm curious, just to change the topic a little bit. We mentioned Titans before. You were at Titans. I was there. What was your? We talked about some of the core concepts, or what was the gist of Titans? What did you get out of it?
Yeah, I should actually bring up. I'm going to use this as just a momentary excuse to talk about my blog, Breakthrough Marketing Secrets, because I've written about takeaways a couple times, and I just on Monday, Monday as we speak, I wrote. I wrote the top takeaways for beginning copywriters. The funny thing was, to me, the thing that jumped out so much was that there was very little talk of tactics at Titans and so much about mindset and not getting caught in kind of this little mind of copyright of the copywriting world, going out to the big mind of the whole world and thinking about your market and all of that. One of the things that was recommended a couple times was reading about litigation and how the best lawyers built their cases. And that was completely fascinating to me, like thinking about the different types of persuasion out there, and that's still fairly connected. There were a lot of talks there, I think, about topics that might be thought of as kind of woo woo, on like, putting yourself on. I compared it to having a GPS. And a lot of them talked about kind of a variation on this, that like you have to enter the, let's say you want to drive from Los Angeles to New York City. Well, you enter, the address in New York City in your GPS, and then you have to like stay on course for that entire trip. And it's a long trip. But if you stay on course, you like know where you're going. If you get off route, you have to get back on route. And to become really great, to become a titan at direct response or anything else, like that was one of the big things that I took away, is that you have to be kind of constantly aware of that GPS. I definitely did the same thing as a copywriter. Very early on, I wrote, this was in 2009, a letter from my own services that said something along the lines of, imagine hiring the next Clayton Makepeace Gabinga or Michael Masterson, when they're basically fresh and whatever. Now the letter itself bombed, but the thinking behind it was sound. I mean, that particular letter, I don't think generated me any business. But it was actually like very similar to some of the stuff that I heard from the Titans up on stage. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing where, this is a concept from, I think it's Psycho-Cybernetics is the book, where, getting towards your goal, getting towards anywhere in life, it's very much like sailing a boat or riding a boat across the ocean. The reason being is that you never go in a straight line from point A to B, especially when you're sailing, because your wind blows and you have to sort of zigzag your way there. So the wind blows and you get blown off course.
Especially upwind. Yeah.
Exactly. And you got to zigzag back in, zigzag back. And eventually you get to the destination. But, so often in life, it's very easy to kind of think, well, no, I'm getting so distracted and I'm getting carried away with this thing over here. And those sort of problems. And it's tough to remember, but it's really important to remember that really the process of getting to that goal, whether you're a copywriter right now or whether you already have a business, it doesn't really matter. Getting to anywhere, you zigzag your way there. You can't go in a straight line, and even if you try. And it's an interesting analogy. It's just sort of like what you're saying there, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be that straight line.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And I think the sailing is another great analogy. My grandparents retired onto a sailboat and sailed from Indianapolis, Indiana, which, you have to ride a lot of rivers for a while. Right. But they sailed from Indianapolis, Indiana, down to the Caribbean and all the way across over to South Africa and back. Like in their 60s, I think they were in their 60s when they went to South Africa.
That's an epic ride, man. That would have taken
them a while. There was like 26 days where there was not a sign of human life, like not even a jet contrail across the sky. The whole world could have imploded, as long as the ocean was still there, and they wouldn't have known it for 26 days. But yeah, and so like I grew up visiting them on their sailboat quite often, and that really resonates with me. I enjoy the idea.
I'm curious what you mean about we talked about the core direct response concepts. Like, so aside from, I've talked about this a lot in my training, in the training community, which is that a lot of people get hyped up and they get all excited about tactics, like a headline template or a good sales letter template, when a lot of, the core fundamental to me is empathy, and really getting inside someone's head so much that you understand him or her better than they understand themselves. That to me is that's one of those fundamental concepts.
There were 6 words that really like locked into my brain, and I don't remember where I heard them, but they locked into my brain when I was fairly early on in my copywriting career. And it's understanding your prospects' fears, frustrations, and failures, as well as their dreams, their desires, and what they see as their destiny. And like, to write copy, if you understand that, like, what what fears are blocking them from having the life they want? What are they frustrated with today in their life right now? What failures just keep bugging them, like the things that they should have succeeded at, but they didn't? What dreams do they have for their future and for what that can be? What immediate desires do they want fulfilled right now? A lot of it for me, I mean, I'm, about the time that this podcast is published, I have a very small group of copywriters coming to join me for 3 days in Lincoln, Nebraska to chat about this stuff. And, it's a very big topic. But for me, part of it is actually just going and like, it's the psycho-cybernetics technique of theater of your mind, of just trying to put yourself in the mind of the prospect. In 2010, I got to interview Bill Bonner at AWAI. And we talked for a while about his process for copywriting. And this is largely what I try and do, is he just kind of imagines the prospect. And it's not like a real defined process, but he thinks about, for investors, it's, somebody who's maybe right on the cusp of retirement and they're realizing that they haven't saved enough money and they're just looking at their finances and they're thinking, oh geez, I could retire now and probably do okay for a few years, but am I going to be greeting people at Walmart? Am I going to be, checking groceries at the grocery store that I've shopped at for the last 20 years? What is my life going to look like in 10 years if I don't figure this financial thing out and get a bit more money there to back me up? So like really try and put yourself in the mind of this person at this point in their life, and with all the past and all the future kind of crashing on them. And then like just this is in terms of finding what to write about. Just look through all your research and the topics, the news around whatever topic you're writing about, and like really look for what jumps out at you like while you're inside that person in the theater of the mind, right? And then just try and write about that in the best damn way possible, and test it. And what starts to happen if you like stay in a market for a while is your imagination about what who that prospect is and what gets them excited, does start to become more accurate. And that's why, somebody who's been in the business for 20 years is usually going to be better than somebody who's been in the business for 2 years. There are great examples. Denny Hatch wrote a book called Method Marketing, where he had a couple examples of people who wrote their first ever sales letter. And the book, I think, is out of print. But he had, a few sales letters from like superstar pro copywriters and a few sales letters from, people who weren't even copywriters, who just sat down and wrote a letter. And both, because they did such a good job of kind of capturing the gestalt, which is a term from psychology, the big picture of who the prospect was, what they cared about, how the business or organization met them there, they did incredibly, incredibly well. There was one that was like a fundraising chain letter, basically, for like a children's medical research place, and they ended up like shutting it down, even though it was making a ton of money. Like this woman wrote it on her own. I think she was a nurse there, and she's like, this is important, and I just want you to send $10, send 10 of your own dollars, and on your letterhead, retype this letter and send it to like 5 or 10 of your friends, and ask them to send 10 of their own dollars. No matter who they are, just send $10. Yeah. And they made like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then the hospital or the medical research facility like shut it down because they didn't want to be associated with this chain letter. But, I'm like slapping my forehead about that. But, and that was just somebody who really like understood, it wasn't a superstar copywriter. So like understanding your market, that's a great like fundamental direct response, getting back to your question. Right. But also just like the customer process of like, in order for me to buy from you, I have to know who you are first. And so like as a marketer, I have to introduce myself, like provide some sort of value or unique perspective or something to like connect with this person first. And then like once I've connected with them, then I can ask them to like join my list and be a part of my list. And then like once that step has been achieved, I can start trying to make a first sale. But it has to be a gentle sale, not an expensive sale. Like the term tripwire is used for like the $7 offers or whatever, which is it's fair enough term, whatever. And then like a bigger sale from there, and then maybe a big sale or like a continuity sale after that. In the newsletter business, there's a bunch of front-end newsletters that are less than $100 a year. And then, you can step up from there. There's like $1,000 newsletters that focus on smaller stocks with higher volatility and higher potential upside. And then there's like daily trading services where they're providing you updates, and those are much more expensive.
Right.
And so it's all about like building that relationship. And as you build the relationship and deliver more value, faster value, more immediate value, that sort of thing, that allows you to raise the price. So they get more value, you get more value, but it's this like growing relationship.
Right. Okay.
It's not. Yeah,
it's sort of like it's this ongoing thing that I call it a dynamic thing. When people talk about how many emails should an autoresponder be, for example, or when should you stop contacting your customers or leads? It's like, well, never. It's a relationship.
Yeah.
And you can let them end the relationship by unsubscribing or canceling or something like that. But otherwise, if they don't unsubscribe or if they don't decide they don't want to hear from you, then you keep on sending them stuff.
A great story. When I was working for that company out in Oregon, they published IT training. And for a little while, because I couldn't earn a royalty in the marketing department, I switched over to sales where I could get paid a sales commission. But I was still doing direct response marketing. I was just getting a sales commission and driving leads to myself and not the rest of the sales team. I very quickly became one of the top salespeople because I found a way to filter out the people that wanted to buy our really expensive solution, like $30,000. And what I did was I started off with usually a very good conversation with them. Like, this is, maybe your bait piece. I got them to raise their hand and say, I want a consultation about how your training might work in my organization. And then we would have that consultation. And then what I would do is I would just put them in our CRM system, which basically I set up a reminder that I would contact them back. And if I had just had good conversations with them, I might contact them back before the end of the week or early next week. And then as it went on and as like their purchasing process, because a lot of it was B2B sales, so the purchasing process would drag out, I just kept contacting them until I got a yes or a no. And, I told them I don't like maybes. I like yes or no. But if it's not yet, I'm going to keep, touching base and seeing how I can help. Is there anything I can do today to move it along? Yeah. And, it would start out with very frequent contacts. And then, months later, I might be sending somebody a note every 2 or 3 weeks and just saying, hey, how are things going? Is there anything I can do for you today? And it's a little bit different when you're doing like autoresponders and you're, not in a one-on-one sales process. But the principle is the same. Like, when the relationship is hot, you contact them often, but until they say no, like specifically, I don't want to do business with you, you should have some sort of ongoing contact with them and just keep doing it until they say yes or no. And I would have things go on for 6 months or more, where other salespeople would have completely dropped that lead and just, not done anything with it after 2 or 3 contacts. Yeah. I would have a $30,000 purchase order show up and everybody be looking at me like, how the heck are you doing this? Because I'd sell a couple of those a month, which worked out very well for me.
Cool, man.
Okay. and a bunch of other stuff too. So yeah, so that's really the attitude. I mean, like I write my stuff daily. I write articles daily, and it's a different thing because that's what I promised. But that is certainly how you should think about autoresponders.
Okay. Well, cool, man. We're actually right on time here. But okay. So before we go though, let's talk more about what's going on with these breakthrough marketing secrets, and where should the listener go if they want to learn more about what you're up to? Yeah.
So 5 days a week, daily, essentially, I write an article on something from the direct response marketing world or my experience. And, generally Mondays I answer reader questions. Tuesdays I talk about copy. Wednesdays I talk about web marketing stuff. Thursdays I talk about business strategy or marketing strategy. And Fridays I talk about whatever I want. And, I don't have a ton of readers, but I have very excited and loyal readers. I try and deliver a ton of value, contrary to the teaching of some other people who do daily emails. And that's fair. What works for them, and what works for me, works for me. But I write a ton of content for that. It is how I announced my copywriting event. The registrations are now closed, and certainly by the time this is published, the registrations are closed. But I will have a crew coming in to record that. But it's if you're into direct marketing, if you're into copywriting, there's going to be a lot of stuff for you in there. So that's it, breakthroughmarketingsecrets.com. If you go there, the first thing that's going to happen is a video is going to start playing where you are going to learn the most valuable secret that I learned from Gary Bensavinga, who's considered the world's best copywriter years ago. That probably has contributed more to my success than anything else. And it's a secret that's not just for copywriters. It's for life in general and for business and whatever goals you have. Right. You're going to learn that right away, and you're going to have the opportunity to sign up and get a few really valuable free reports. There's some for business owners and some for copywriters, and just good stuff. And it'll give you a chance to also try my daily stuff. And I am happy to have you unsubscribe if you ever feel like, I suck, you hate my articles, or it's just too much. I'd rather have you unsubscribe than complain that it's spam. But I have a ton of loyal subscribers who open it religiously within the first hour they receive it every day. And my stats say that. Okay. So it's a lot of fun, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about marketing.
Cool, man. All right, well, I'll have a link to that breakthroughmarketingsecrets.com in the show notes at themethod.com. Roy, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, awesome. Thank you for having me and the invitation and the opportunity to speak alongside some amazing guests that you've had so far. I can't wait to dig even deeper into the archives and listen to every episode.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more.